Hello everyone and good evening. It's I again, Chris of Primogen, and today we're here to continue our talk about NPCs and power dynamics, the fundamental kindred of a city. One of these days, I'm sure I will be able to think of a reasonable and easy to write title for one of my seminars, but today is not the day. If you recall last time, we were talking quite a lot about the average Camarilla city, some of the stereotypes and things like that. We didn't really get that far because I kind of really had a lot of examples about stereotypes and how Vampire the Masquerade have been doing their cities, or rather White Wolf have been doing their cities for the last couple of years. I would say 30, 40 years almost. So, today we're going to be talking about the social network, basically how White Wolf create their social relationships between NPCs. We're going to talk a little bit about the Prince and the Primogen, and then we're going to go on to talk about the other actors of a city. I do think this is going to take maybe an hour, maybe a little bit more, but I figured we'll just finish the entire seminar today. Unless I run out of energy or I'm unable to talk. So, we did all this stuff. We talked about Gary, Indiana. We talked about Modius. We talked about Chicago. So, we are going to go on to we did the stereotypes, spent quite a lot of time there. So, let's talk about was quite a lot of frames here. Let's talk about the social networks. Pictured here is the relationship chart between the Primogen of Chicago. And this is in I believe, the first or second edition of Chicago by Night. I'm not entirely sure. I don't quite remember which order they were in. But I do believe this is first edition, because second edition, I think Sun actually served as the Malkavian Primogen, but don't quote me on that one. But this is how White Wolf has been doing their NPC relationships for quite a long time. If you look at it, you see there are arrows going back and forth. There is the arrow for Lodin's relationship to Critias. He considers Critias presumptuous, and Critias in turn considers Lodin, he has contempt for him. They kind of try to summarize the relationship in just one word. You can see between Nikolai and Critias there is the mutual respect going on. Nikolai, of course, being the child Primogen of Toreador of Tremere in Chicago. And then there's also respect between him and Annabelle. So this is a very simple way of illustrating interpersonal relationships. Now, you will see, of course, that not everyone has a connection. Annabelle and Khalid do not. The Toreador and the Nosferatu Primogen do not have a connection like this. And this is a bit of a problem with these kind of charts, and we'll go into that later. But basically, social relationship in Vampire the Masquerade, that's kind of the bread and butter of this game. It's really about... I just realized I'm hiding Khalid behind my face here. I'm using my 3D model. I'm using my live 2D model today. I'm trying to slowly transition into this kind of new experiment of being a VTuber of sort. So also trying to keep myself here in the corner for you to look at, to be gawking at, and to be entertained while I'm talking. So we'll look at it that way. So Vampire the Masquerade and social relationships go together like bread and butter. Really, it's all about maintaining all these multiple connections. So this is not the only chart having these characters in the Chicago by Night book. Rather, it is just one of many. Critias will pop up in the Bruja clan chart. He is the Bruja Primogen after all. And Lodin will appear on many, many different charts. And that is because every vampire has a different kind of network that they move within. They made something similar to this in V5, where they had relationship charts of a coterie. And this is kind of working on the same principle, that you sort of show these relationships almost like one of those thread and pin charts you'd see in... what's it called? Always Sunny in Philadelphia, when he talks about Pepe Sylvia, that kind of stuff. So you really want to have a lot of these charts to work with, because they really provide a very good overview of the relationship between your NPCs. This is my quotation mark design philosophy when I'm making NPCs. I follow this and another thing that Vampire does. And these things, sorry, I had to clear my throat. These things are, of course, first the relationship chart. I want every character to have at least surface level relationship with the others in a city, unless they're absolutely new. There's no reason for the Toreador Primogen and the Tremere Primogen to be best friends, of course, but they have a working relationship, and this is something you want to kind of take into consideration when you're making a city. The other design philosophy I tend to use is the secret design philosophy. It's secrets. And this is something they had in first edition, I believe, and then they dropped it in second edition. Or maybe it's the other way around. I tend to get the first and second edition of Chicago by Night mixed up. It's not like I have the books right here, but I will not interrupt this to look through it. But basically, secrets were a list of little rumors and hearsay about the many different NPCs that you could feed the players. And they continued this very nice tradition in V5 Chicago by Night core book by having all these kind of rumors and just, stuff going around that the player characters might hear about these different NPCs. I really enjoy this way of giving this city more life by having this prepared, so to speak. There are many different websites like kumo.io, a free website that will allow you to create these kind of charts very easily. I use them for Stockholm by Night. These allow for much more widespread charts like the ones you're seeing on screen right now, with multiple colors, multiple layers, pictures, places, all these kind of things. And you can create a really intricate roadmap of your city here. And you can actually put your city's map underneath to make it even better for navigation. Of course, don't get it too cluttered, because then it's not really going to help you. It's going to be more of a hindrance rather than a help. But Kumu is very good in the sense of giving you an overall sense of, okay, where have I worked, where have I not worked, where do I need to polish the city a little bit more. It gives you a great kind of mind map overview. Of course, here we see it again. This is literally the same kind of chart presented in V5. You have the Prince Jackson and his relationship to not only the Primogen, but also to the many different leaders of his so-called government. This is a foundation, not an end goal. I say this because this is like the bare minimum. This is a good place to start when you're making a city, because it provides you with a little seed for every single relationship. If you look at, for example, Sun and Santos' relationship, Santos considers Sun nauseating, and Sun considers Santos his plaything. This doesn't really tell us too much. I mean, it does tell us their general view of each other, but if you want to have both of them in a game, and this is all you have about their relationship, once the players encounters these two, they will probably struggle a little bit with, well, you will likely struggle a little bit with describing this relationship in more detail. So always consider this like a bare minimum, a kind of foundation to work upon. Have your own notes. But as a side note, don't get too dependent on your notes, because sometimes we tend to defer to authority when we're trying to explain something, and we will, instead of going with what we know in our heart, we will start to mumble and go through our notes and be like, all right, what did I write about this relationship? If you don't remember it and it's not important, make something up. If it feels better, make something up. It's a story that's alive. Not everything has to be set in stones, and only you have access to your notes. This is also important to remember. Sorry for mumbling, but this is also very important to remember. You are the only one who have access to your notes, full access to your notes, which means that something that didn't pan out the way you wanted it to, rehash that idea, reuse the NPC, rewrite stuff in the background. As long as the game is sort of consistent, the players won't know any different. This is a inspiration and a reference, of course. This is leaning into what I was talking about before. You don't have to make your charts like this. This still has the same kind of issues that the other charts had before. Sun and Marcel do not have any relationships according to this chart because it's a wheel chart. Annabelle does not have any relationship with Damien, even though Damien is the sheriff of Chicago in V5 and Annabelle is the Toreador Primogen. Realistically, they should have a relationship, but in this chart, at least they don't. So this is more of an inspiration. Kumu.io is much better at providing you multiple layers of relationship charts in just one chart. Yes, this is an obvious thing that I just said. Not every kindred has a connection to someone else. You can consequently also decide that there is no relationship between two vampires. Now, this might appear at least to be contrarian to what I just said, that they have a surface level relationship, but maybe they've just never met. Highly unlikely in the Primogen, highly likely in between clans. A Malkavian outsider might never have met a Tremere shut-in, for example. So you don't have to have these charts for every single character. You can definitely leave some out and even discover the relationship mid-game. It's really not that important. Vampire the Masquerade is a deeply political game, for better or worse. If you're not into this kind of stuff, V5 might not be the best edition for you. Revised is certainly the best edition if you want to stray away from this, if you want to do Vampire in a different way, if you want to do Sabbat, if you want to do Incarnu, whatever you want to do. Revised, or V20 even more so, is your edition of choice. But Vampire is a game that's highly geared towards a political game. It has pretty complex rules for social interactions. It has a lot of disciplines that have social ramifications. It really puts a lot of its energy and page count into describing social relationships, the politics, the jihad, whatever you want to call it. This is certainly the keystone or the cornerstone of Vampire the Masquerade. So if you want to run a game like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there are other games. There are even other World of Darkness games. Hunters Hunted, Project Twilight certainly helped you out there. The new Hunter the Reckoning game has a more turn towards that rather than the kind of solar-esque powers of the old Hunter the Reckoning. I'm looking over at the wrong bookshelf because I moved my books all around, but the old Hunter the Reckoning certainly had more of a super-powered sense rather than... Well, actually, I guess Buffy kind of falls into that category a little bit. Now let's get into talking about the different kind of NPCs that matter in a city. And of course the prince. Boy, have I talked about the prince. I've done videos about princes. I've discussed them to wit's end. But there are many different kind of princes you can do. The Venture Magnate, the Old Noble, that's your classic Lacroix. You could certainly replace his clan with Toreador or La Sombra, but you know the character. Lacroix, or to a certain sense, Lodin, I mean, the prince. This is when you think about Vampire the Masquerade in terms of classical, the Venture Magnate, or the Old Noble, the Noblesse Oblige. My French is bad. This is the kind of prince you imagine. There's also the classic Nosferatu control freak, the prince that seems to know everything about everyone, the prince that has high levels of security, that doesn't speak directly to the players, that kind of stuff. That's a classic prince as well. Doesn't have to be Nosferatu, but certainly someone who avoids direct physical interaction. They're quite aware of the powers of disciplines, and they're not confident enough in their own powers to encounter players directly. They might operate through agents, they might operate through devices, or even written messages under a stone. This is certainly a classic kind of prince. The Bruja Lip Service. This might be an anarch in wolf's clothing, so to speak, or sheep's clothing if that's more of your perception of the Camarilla. But the Bruja Lip Service is possibly not the best named prince archetype, but basically someone who's running their city kind of like an extension of the Anarch Free States. They pay a lip service to the Camarilla. They're technically prince, but they're kind of playing fast and loose with the rules. They don't really care too much for prestige. they generally consider themselves a little bit above the jihad, the political game. Of course, there's degrees of hell. Maybe they're trying to project this image, but they're actually more of a control freak. But you kind of get what I'm talking about here. You have the Malkavian Mad King, as is the case of Atlanta, pre-Sabbat attack. The Malkavian Mad King rules his city like a madman, obviously. So they would be unreliable. Maybe the city is quite anarchic in nature. Maybe the Primogen have to step up and be like the eye of the storm, as the Malkavian kind of sends out crazy decrees that now all vampires should be wearing purple, or maybe he decides that suddenly there's going to be a huge game of war in the city, and there's going to be two factions. These kind of things, like an unreliable prince, can make for very interesting one-session games. In that sense that, oh yeah, I don't have anything prepared, so your coterie receives a letter. The prince has decreed that tonight 10 human sacrifices have to be found, or something or another. Or these 10 mortals are priceless, and whoever controls the most of them when the night is over will be crowned king for a day. You know, shake it up a little bit. The prince is the one who has the most power, so what he says goes, or what she says goes. You can have the reluctant gangrel. We've seen this before as well. Nobody steps up to the plate, so the gangrel takes the bullet. Mixing my metaphors here, but basically a gangrel can certainly make for an interesting prince. Very, very practical, very down to earth, and very pragmatic kind of prince. Someone who's probably less on formality, but certainly knows how to command respect. Maybe there's a Garou incursion. Maybe the Venture Magnate is now a smoking pile of dust, and the only one who's able to stem the Garou tide is the Gangrel Primogen, who now has to take command. Will they keep command after the war against the Garou is over, or will they have power wrested away from them? Will they perhaps have gained a taste for power during this short period? That's entirely up to you, the storyteller. The nobody. This is interesting. Maybe there simply is no political body of kindred in a city. Maybe the city is very big, but the kindred population is small. Maybe there has been an inquisitorial cleansing. There aren't any kindred left of power, of note. So the nobody steps up, and heavy is the crown, indeed, as this Kaitif or this Nosferatu neonate, or whoever you want, just suddenly decides that I'm going to be the prince. And when the Justicars show up and ask who the prince is, they will say that they are. And since there's no one left to challenge them, that will certainly work. You can even put a twist on this and have a prince that is actually incredibly powerless, but projects an image of immense power, or simply is very lucky. That will be an interesting twist for the players, at least. There are some common mistakes we make as storytellers when we describe or construct our princes. One of them is, of course, as we talked about before, the stereotype. We kind of rely on players and our own preconceived notions, and we create a kind of two-dimensional prince that doesn't have a lot of depth. We might also create a paper tiger. Now, this is a metaphor that basically suggests that there is a very powerful appearance, but when you look at the other side, it's just paper. It's just a flat character. It's a flat threat. It's a non-existent threat. So maybe this prince is all sizzle and no steak. There's nothing to back them up. You haven't thought about how their power works. Maybe you decided to make a prince that has a lot of disciplines, but no influence over the mortal society. So the players pretty quickly figure out that they can exploit this and get rid of the prince. Now, you might roll with this. Actually, I think you should roll with this if you made this mistake. But it's certainly a common mistake that we focus on one aspect of a character to the detriment of the other. So keep in mind that princes are the most powerful kindred of a city, not necessarily because of their disciplines. And remember, Loden, Prince of Chicago, the archetypical prince of the Camarilla, is less than 200 years old as a vampire, and still is a prince. So he's doing something right. He has disciplines, of course, but that's not his strongest suit. The buffoon, we make a prince that's very easy to dislike. Maybe we make him a foppy toreador. Oh, I can't believe my court is being invaded by these scoundrels. You know, that kind of a character, which is very funny. But the problem is that if you create a character like that, it could, at worst case, it might break immersion. It really depends on how immersed your group is in the setting. But you don't become prince by being an absolute moron unless you're also incredibly unfortunate. And what I mean by that is that nature abhors a vacuum. If you have a prince that's not fit for the job, they will very quickly be replaced, unless they're serving a very useful purpose for another kindred. This is how the kindred world works. Nobody accidentally falls into power. It's not like human history with the inbreeding and the noble families. You'd get the occasional buffoon, the occasional incompetent nobleman or woman who's in way above their heads. Not so much among vampires. That would be highly unlikely. Make for an interesting and fun character, but if they don't have anything going for them, at best your players are going to very quickly try to exploit them. Also, worth mentioning with the buffoon, and this kind of ties into the evil monster as well, you don't want to make a prince that's too unlikable. You don't want to make a prince that's violent, irregular, prone to killing his subordinates or their subordinates, prone to doing things that in any realistic society would quickly have them deposed. The Primogen exists as a kind of counterweight, counterbalance to the prince, and if the prince is constantly breaking their own traditions, or endangering the Masquerade, or doing anything that's in the long run not sustainable, they will very quickly disappear unless they are incredibly powerful. And even then, you gotta wonder, how did they become so powerful if they're an absolute idiot? The evil monster is kind of the same thing. Nobody wants to live in a city ruled by a monster. I mean, monster we all are, but someone who's willing to sacrifice babies or burn down a hospital or blow up a subway station full of people just to get like one or two Sabbat agents, that kind of a character very quickly loses any kind of, not even sympathy, but like allegiance. Because if you're having a group of players who are playing Camarilla agents, they will most likely fall into one of two categories. They will either be fairly loyal to the Camarilla, because this is, of course, subconsciously the premise you've all accepted. We're playing as Camarilla. Or they will be kind of sneaky and try to subvert or undermine the Camarilla, often for their own gains. And you as a storyteller should probably know about this before you start the game. But there is a willingness to cooperate with the Camarilla to a certain extent. But the amount of times I've been in, and to my great shame, run games where the players just kind of sigh and their shoulders sink and they go like, all right, we're only doing this because we're going to get killed otherwise. But we don't trust this guy. We don't like this guy. We don't want anything to do with him. You managed to create an enemy. And unless you really want the prince to be the enemy of the players, you got to make them reasonable. A good leader rewards. They don't just punish and refrain from punishing. A good leader knows the balance there. Also, the genius. We want to make a prince who's very, very good at their job, who's infallible. Problem is, we're not infallible, so don't start pulling bullshit out of your pants when the players are, outsmarting the prince. If the players are actually coming up with a really good plan to depose the prince, or, exploit one of the weaknesses that you, out of character or out of storyteller, might have accidentally put there, don't just go, nah, he's got even more disciplines, or he knows a bunch of people that will protect him. Be willing to kill your darlings. Be willing to have your NPCs be killed if the players are being clever about it. So, the genius, yeah, sure, you can have a smart prince, but there's only one of you, and you have a whole game to run, and there's like 3 to 5 people, roughly average, playing against you, and they might have a very clear goal with what they want to do, and unlike you, they're only running one character each. So keep that in mind. If you're making a genius level prince, be willing to roll with the punches. People also, for some reason, tend to not like these characters because the genius is not just someone who's smart. They're also very bragging about it. Nobody likes those characters. And this is, man, I really should have gone through my notes even more closely. This ties into the Deus Ex Machina. This is literally what I was just talking about. Don't pull solutions out of your hat. Don't break realism or series of consequences because you didn't plan for things. If you really are in a situation where the game is going to suffer because you didn't think about something, tell the players. Out of character, be like, okay, we gotta put a pin in this. I don't have anything prepared. I like where this is going. I want to continue this, but I don't have things prepared. Take a break, maybe. Take a half-hour break. Let the players chill out, have some coffee or whatever. Well, you think, what am I going to do now? This is vastly preferable to flying at the seat of your pants. Is that how it goes? Yeah. Basically, if you don't know what you're doing, take a break. Try to figure it out. And if you really can't do it, then put a pin in it. Focus on something else. But don't pull out magical solutions out of the pocket. Maybe don't have a demon spawn in the room and kill everyone just because you didn't plan for what would happen if the players actually went J'accuse on the prince. So yeah, keep that in mind. Some things to consider for your prince. I'm waiting with bated breath because I don't remember what's here. Oh, okay, this is easy. Does the prince want to be a prince? Are they doing this because they want to, or are they doing this because they feel they have an obligation to? Are they doing this because it would be worse if they didn't? Keep this in mind when you're designing your prince. Be like, all right, what is the main motivation for the prince here? Do they actually want to be a prince? Who knows? You know, or maybe you don't, but try to think about it. Why are they prince if they don't want to be? How much control do they give to other kindred? Are they a control freak? Do they have very, very strict hunting territories? Do they have like a map of the city on their haven wall and they just have all these pins all over the place and they plan everything out in the smallest detail? Or do they just go, yeah, respect the rules and don't bring your trouble to me? Both kind of rulerships work. But you kind of had to decide this when you're making a prince. Do they really want to control other kindred? Is that part of the game for them? Or are the other kindreds just distractions from their own pursuit of Golconda, perhaps? Like, why are they princes? How do they feel about the other kindred of the city? Who do they keep close and why? Who's their seneschal? Who's their sheriff? Who's the harpy? Who's the Primogen? Like, are the Primogen close to the prince or not? Usually you would imagine that the sheriff and the seneschal are probably the two kindred closest to the prince. The sheriff is the prince's extended arm of justice, and the seneschal is basically on cleaning duty and making sure everything runs smoothly. Now, how much of this they do and why is entirely up to you, but these two kindred at least should have a pretty complex relationship with their prince. Are they upset that they don't have enough power? Do they feel like they're being held back? Do they have a blood debt to the prince? Is that why they're doing this? Like, what is the motivation for them? What is their relationship to other princes and the Camarilla? And this exact line of thought spawned when I read a what is it called again? Well, give me just a second. I need to look this up. Okay, so let's see here. Basically, when Loden died, I'm trying to find the term here for Lady Anne who of course was the Venture Elder in charge of London while Mithras was gone, she wrote an obituary. Obituary. God, that is a hard word for me to say. She wrote an obituary in the Camarilla book of V5 for Lodin. He obviously left an impact on a lot of different princes and the Camarilla at large. So, sure, cities are islands in a vast ocean of danger. This is established. This is how it is. But they still kind of have relationship. Do they have a Justicar or someone they turn to in times of need? Do they know someone of the inner circle? Are they the childer of a Justicar, for example? Like, what's their relationship with the Camarilla at large and other cities' princes? Like you, Lodin and Modius, for example. How active and proactive are they? Are they, loath to do anything? Are they so old that they perceive a year as little more than an hour? How far ahead do they plan? Are they constantly reacting to things happening, or are they preventing or preparing for things happening? This kind of ties in with the Nosferatu control freak archetype I spoke about before. Like, are they willing to... how far ahead do they plan, basically? How active are they in their city? Do they leave everything up to the seneschal? Or do they not have a seneschal? Do they do everything themselves? That's possible as well, especially in a smaller city. And what is their end goal? Why are they prince? Is being prince of a city, is that their end goal? Is that what they want to do? Or is there more to it? Do they actually pursue Golconda? Do they want a seat at the inner council of the Camarilla? Do they want to become a Justicar? Do they want to have more cities? Do they want to put their childer in charge of other cities? Do they want to build an imperium? What is their end goal of princedom? Because most of them don't envision themselves as being like, yeah, I'm done. That's not really vampires. And if they don't have an active goal, they will certainly get so paranoid that they will start pursuing, protection against other vampires. This is a very prince-centric episode, I'm realizing again. I've done this many, many times, but the prince is a very important character. So, something else you might want to consider when making your city, that was a very quick way of saying, something else you may want to consider when making your city is, what is the source of power for the prince? A lot of times people will often assume that to make a powerful vampire, it's all about the disciplines, the generations, and the attributes. So you had the character sheet of Cain floating around. And that character sheet, I hate it. I think it's stupid. I get it. It's a joke. I get it. He's super powerful. You can't fight Cain. I get it. It's not funny. Because it kind of takes so much away from what I consider to be, again, this is a consideration, not a law. I don't think that disciplines and generations and attributes matter squat in Vampire. I think they're certainly good for entry-level gameplay, when you're playing on the streets, when you're fighting Sabbat and Anarchs. Certainly these things will be in handy, and I 100% understand that my way of playing Vampire does not appeal to everyone. Many people have asked me to talk about disciplines. I still have not talked about disciplines on my channel because, frankly, it's not something I'm interested in. I don't think they are the reason I play Vampire. I don't think not subterfuge. I don't think presence or quietus or any other discipline really. Thaumaturgy is kind of cool, but I don't think the disciplines are why I play Vampire. Rather, for me, Vampire is about the social power. Like, Garou, absolutely, they're powerhouses. They're warriors of Gaia, so their stats matter a lot. But if a vampire goes up against a Garou, I mean, elder vampires can annihilate Garou. It's a really wonky power chart, how it kind of changes over time. But most vampires of really old age won't even encounter a Garou because they have so many agents, so many allies, and so many little tendrils hooked into everything that they don't even need to bother. This is the power of a vampire. They can simply outlive any threat. That's the power of vampirism. You don't die. And you don't die because you don't get into fistfights with Garou. Like, it's that simple. Get away from the streets. That's, if you want to play a long goal, if you want to play Elders in Vampire, rule number 1, don't do dangerous shit yourself. Most of the time, younger kindred will not see even a hair's breadth of how much an Elder vampire can do, because they gain nothing by showing their hand. Rather, they manipulate through their contacts, through shell companies, all those kind of things. It's about influence. It's about police and media and politicians, unions, businesses. Vampires invest money as an insurance. Chicago is basically run by vampires. The police, oh yeah, all of a sudden, your entire business has been confiscated in a criminal investigation. Ain't nothing you can do about it, because the prince decided that your stuff is now his stuff until he decides to give it back to you. That's power. Sure, I mean, you can go up against the police. You can storm the police station Terminator 1 style and kill everyone there. Good luck. You're breaking the Masquerade, guaranteed, which gives the prince an excuse to have you completely destroyed. So this is how you play Elders. You don't get into fistfights. You have influence over kindred. You have, of course, a prince with good standing they will be a voice of authority in their community. If they declare a bloodhunt on someone, if they're a popular prince, not a lot of people are going to question it. If they're an unpopular prince, they're going to have a lot of resistance. Also, by the way, as an aside, a prince that tries to play both fields, pro-anarchs, they're open-minded about anarchs, but they're also trying to help Elders, they will have the least success, because Elders do not trust anarchs. Anarchs do not like Elders. So you kind of have to find a good balance of making them both hate you just enough. They can also have boons. People might owe them favors. They almost definitely owe them favors. They might have gained skills of insight over the years. It's very, very rare for a vampire to gamble on odds they are not sure of. They have disposable and indisposable things, and their lives certainly are indisposable. So an elder has stats because an elder needs to have stats, but an elder really is just a force of civilization. They're an avatar of politics in that sense. Again, this is all my opinions. Even in the Sabbat, this becomes more and more true the higher up in the hierarchy you go. It's about politics. They might not have any power at all. Maybe they're just there. You would be surprised how many players. You would be surprised how many players would find this kind of unbelievable. And frankly, it is. It's highly unrealistic that a vampire would become prince with little to no power. But it could happen if you want to make a twist out of it. And we're done with the prince. Only took us an hour and 40 minutes to get here. Hour 45. So, we are now at the Primogen, whom I very lovingly refer to as the Clown Patrol. And the Primogen is, well, I mean, you know my name. The Primogen is my favorite part of the city because they have zero responsibility but complete authority, which is exactly how it should be. They have no legal obligation to help anyone in their clan. If they are the most powerful Nosferatu in a city, it doesn't matter if they don't even listen to their neonates. They're still the Primogen. Of course, depending on your clan, depending on the power distribution, depending on your status, and of course your personality, some Primogen are very, very involved in their clan's politics. Others couldn't care less. Tremere Primogen would most likely have a pretty okay relationship with their chantry and the chantry members, simply because that's how the Tremere work. Who are they, though? Who are they outside of the Primogen? We like to put things in boxes. We as human beings like to put things in a category and be like, okay, this is what they are. We're done. We'll move on. We're done. That's not how nature works, sadly. And just ask any kind of dinosaur scientist. That's technically true. That's technically a true term. Ask any dinosaur scientist how easy it is to categorize dinosaurs in like species, because surprise, evolution happens, and things are more than one thing, and sometimes they are between two things, and sometimes they're a dead end and there's nothing following them, so there's no point in studying that. But basically the Primogen are not only a Primogen, they only meet maybe once a year or once a month. The rest of the time, they, just like every other Kindred city, are doing their own thing. You might be noticing a pattern here of how things work, and that's because, yes, I like to imagine that NPCs don't just stand around and don't do anything until the players interact with them. Stuff happens in a city. Oh, that was very loud, sorry. Stuff happens in a city. And honestly, something... I will probably mention this at another point. I might have even written this down. But a good rule of thumb is to say, okay, during these 3 nights that I have planned a session to run, these 5 things will happen. These things will happen. They might not happen. The players might stop it, but they'll happen otherwise. That's a really good way to keep your city alive, because you can't keep your players... you can't keep 100% of all the action centered on the players. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, what clans are represented and who aren't? I'm having a lot of difficulty talking today. Let's get back to the topic at hand. What clans are represented and who aren't? So, surprise, Camarilla has had a couple of changes. They've added the Banu Hakim, they've added the La Sombra, and they've lost the Bruja and the Gangrel. Sort of. And maybe they haven't. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. Because, frankly, there's Bruja who chose to stay with the Camarilla, and there are Gangrel who chose to stay as well. And there are many La Sombra who chose not to, and there are a few Banu Hakim who would very much like to find out where the Camarilla is so they can drink all their blood. But which clans are represented and which aren't kind of gives you a good insight into the political standing of these clans. Let's say you have a city. Let's say this is V20. So let's say you have a vampire city and the Giovanni have a seat in the Primogen. Yeah, let that one sink in. The Giovanni, who made a promise not to get involved in Camarilla politics, have a seat on the Primogen. Why? Well, it's not impossible, because, again, the Camarilla is not a globally spanning organization with top control. The inner circle of the Camarilla certainly have a say in a lot of different things, but if a prince has a beneficial agreement with the local Giovanni, where the Giovanni actually have a say on the council, who are they to mess with that? They don't really care. As long as things keep rolling on at a relatively controlled matter, it's fine. They don't care. So that will certainly be a very different kind of Primogen from what the players might expect, but it's certainly not impossible. And what sway, what power do the Primogen hold over the prince, their clans, and the mortals around them? This is, of course, a lot of work. Many times we're just going to want to go, okay, there's 7 Primogen, there's one of each of these clans, and this one is evil, and this one is good, and this one doesn't kind of care. Okay, we're done, let's move on to the next part. Yes, this is why making your own city, it's a lot more work than you'd think. This doesn't necessarily have to be 100% fleshed out, but okay, the Nosferatu Primogen, why are they Primogen? Well, Mr. Primogen, you might say, they are Primogen because they have the most power. They have 5 levels of Obfuscate, and they have 4 levels of animalism. Okay. Yes, but why does this give them the right to be the Primogen? Because yeah, sure, they might be the most powerful Nosferatu, but that does not necessarily mean that the Primogen Council will go like, oh yeah, let's have a Nosferatu on our council. There is no rule saying the Nosferatu are allowed to have a representative on the Primogen Council. Again, we tend to look at things in patterns and systems, and we see one example and we go, this is how it's supposed to be. This is not how it works in Vampire. You can have a city without a Primogen. There is no rule saying you need to have a Primogen. And there's no rule saying that every clan of a city should have a representative. There is no rule saying you can't have more than one Nosferatu as a Primogen clan member. Maybe the Primogen is just a group of Nosferatu problem solvers that the prince turns to because they have their fingers in all different kinds of pies in the city. How about that one? That could work. What are their end goals? Why are they Primogen? A lot of times we would like to think that the Primogen would just decide to be prince if they had the chance to. That's not necessarily true. Quite a lot of vampires do not want to be prince at all. They don't think it's worth it. They think it's a bunch of baloney, and they would much rather just be Primogen, because that gives them, again, 0 responsibility, 100% authority, and that's the way they want it. So end goals, definitely keep that in mind when you're making your Primogen as well. Now, why are these Primogen in this city? Well, why are the players in the city? Well, maybe they were in torpor before the city was built. They found a nice cave and they went, okay, I'm gonna just nap here for a little bit. 200 years later, they wake up and bang, boom, their cave is now a miniature golf course. That's weird, but they adapt. They roll with the punches. They realize that the little fur trading company that they owned shares in 200 years ago has now become a major subsidiary of Pentex, and they have a shit ton of money. The only problem is, of course, how are they going to get access to that money, because that money belonged to someone who went missing 200 years ago. But maybe they got the money back, and that's why they're in this city. See, this didn't take an awful lot of thinking, and it wasn't super serious, but now we already have a reason for this particular Primogen member to be in the city. Is it a good reason? Why are they in this city? If the prince hates them, or if they hate being a Primogen, why are they still here? Maybe there's nowhere else to go. That's fair. But then why aren't they doing something to change their situation? And what is their relationship with their clan? Are they like a matriarch? Is everyone their childer? Or are they literally the grunt? The grunt? The grunt? Yeah, I think it's the grunt of the litter. Yes, so are they basically the weakest of their clan, and they're just forced to sit on all these pointless meetings because the rest of the clan know that they don't have any influence at all in the Primogen? That's a possibility. Maybe all the players are members of the Primogen, and they're put there because their elders were like, we're too busy. The prince does whatever he wants anyway, so he just needs a bunch of yes men. So go sit on the council, don't make a fool of yourself, and there we go. It's fine. Maybe that's why. Who knows? And what is their relationship with the other Primogen members? I think this kind of goes without saying. Yeah, I mean, do they hate each other? Do they like each other? This is the cornerstone of this entire presentation. I feel like I've talked enough about that. But what is the Primogen's relationship to the player characters? What does the Primogen do? Why would the players at any point interact with the Primogen? Well, most likely they're never going to meet the Primogen Council, or if they do, it's under very dire circumstances. The Primogen Council is very unlikely to have public meetings, especially considering how vampire disciplines work. They might do. I had, in Stockholm by Night, I had the Primogen meeting underneath the building of Parliament, and those meetings were actually partially public. with some Tremere assistance in terms of detecting usage or disciplines and those kind of things. But yes, they had public official meetings and they voted on things, very much in the spirit of Scandinavian fear of authority, fear of taking charge. Why would these Primogen speak with the player characters? Okay, classic example. Toreador Primogen is also the host of Elysium. Not necessarily the host, that would be some unfortunate keeper of Elysium, but it's being held in the honor of so-and-so's 95th embracing day, or whatever. Maybe they're there, inviting all the players and power brokers of the city, and they welcome the players. Maybe they're the sires of the player characters. Maybe they're gauging their competence. Maybe they killed the sires, and I'm like, okay, you're on thin ice because you were embraced without permission. You're gonna have to show your worth to the city. Otherwise, as a Primogen, I have the power to have you executed. Or maybe they simply go, okay, I want this thing done, but I can't do it myself because my hands are tied, so you got to do this for me and I'll owe you a boon. Simple, easy peasy. How do they perceive the player characters? To take a step back to the prince part, keep in mind the lesson that you want to make a complex enough character that the players don't immediately hate them, because I think there's a good reason for why we tend to do that. And I think the reason is film and video games and books. That's plural, so the reasons are. But I think general narrative structure presents us a pretty clear antagonist in a book or a movie or anything like that. We're not supposed to like this antagonist. Think Snape of Harry Potter. Think Iron Man of Iron Man, whom we're of course not supposed to like. I'm joking, of course. But movies and books tend to present a very clear antagonist, someone who's in a position of power and who's not very likable, doesn't have a lot of positive qualities. This kind of narrative works decently well in most forms of media. I don't necessarily think it works well in role-playing games, unless you want this character to become the enemy of the players. Because we will create this kind of two-dimensional villain, and we'll think, this guy is the prince, he's very powerful, nobody's going to want to mess with him. But when you present this character to the players, or this Primogen to the players will go, we're going to kill him, because he's the bad guy. And you go, oh. Surprise Pikachu face. I didn't think that was going to happen. I planned for this prince to be around for a while. And all of a sudden, the story you had planned for the players is completely derailed because the players, in turn, instead devote all their time and energy to find ways to depose the prince. Whoops! Story just took a turn in a direction you did not expect it to go. So this is important. Make sure that the Primogen perceives the player characters as something more than just tools, and if they do perceive them as tools, at least give them the courtesy of perceiving them as intelligent tools. God, I am bad today. It's been a long day of meetings. Sorry. What if the PCs are the Primogen? Well, I mean, we talked about this before. If the players are the Primogen, tons of different fun situations. If you're playing Elders, I mean, very high tier politics power, very slow games like that. Very fun too, though, but you definitely have to be into the kind of political mind games. And even then, if you just make it a sandbox, it pretty quickly gets boring and repetitive. Surprise, Eternal Life is pretty boring. If the PCs are, play characters are fresh-faced neonates made into Primogen, well then there's your story seed. You can have tons of fun with that. You can do many, many different things. If a Primogen hates a player character, I think a lot of storytellers, contrary-wise to what I said before, a lot of storytellers are also terrified of really beating down on a player character and really punishing stupid behavior. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I personally really struggle with being with punishing bad behavior. If I have a player character act like a complete buffoon, insulting the prince, or doing really stupid things, I tend to act on the err on the side of cautious and just have the prince or Primogen go, ha ha ha, you silly little creature, I don't even care that you just insulted my entire lineage. You don't have to do that. You can have the player character basically be stripped of all their domain or hunting rights and be like, well, my dear little neonates who just insulted me and all my ancestors, for the next 3 months, you will only feed when I tell you to. And, that's going to be felt. They're going to feel that. So don't be afraid of punishing the player characters if the player acted in a foolish manner. Don't confuse this with punishing players who don't know what they're doing. There is a merit in, at least in Revised Edition, which is common sense. And honestly, I think a lot of people I know could have really benefited from this merit, because a 1-point merit that basically is meant for new players to have the storyteller go, now that you think about it, that doesn't really seem like a great idea. Wow, yeah. That kind of merit is extremely good to have if you're not very confident with a setting, or if you tend to be a very impulsive person who acts without thinking. Consider getting common sense. It might save your character's life. Now then, here is the actually, I think this is a good place to round it up, and we'll do all the other factions in the next episode. I said I was going to finish this now, but we're 55 minutes in, and we're just now getting to this kind of exercise. So the next part, which is going to be Anarch, Sabbat, Garou, and all this kind of stuff, we'll handle that in the next episode, which will be arriving much earlier. I promise. I have been sick a bunch of times this month. It's a bad excuse. But what I will do is that I will record tomorrow the next episode, and I will schedule that for next week. I swear on me mom, and you will see it. You will of course not see it. I will make it public for my some certain levels of my Patreon, because I have been neglecting them awfully. But I will make the next episode tomorrow. I swear on me mom. So here is a little exercise that you can do. And it might just inspire you. Even if you don't do it, it might be a very inspirational and fun exercise. So, the city of Bell's Pass. This is also, by the way, tiers and levels above the previous exercise we did. The city of Bell's Pass is your classic Rust Belt industrial mid-level city with a population of close to 500,000. Just your average city. There are roughly 25 kindred in the city, give or take one or another, and the prince, a Ventru former steel baron, recently disappeared, leaving a power vacuum. He had no childer, having lost his only due to a Sabbat conflict in the 90s, and he never embraced again. The population distribution is 2 Banu Hakim, sire and child, with little political influence. 4 Bruja, 2 anarchs and 2 Camarilla loyalists, constantly arguing. Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. 1 gangrel, older than everyone else and very protective of the city. 3 newly arrived La Sombra, all having come at separate times. 2 Malkavians, both of whom were close friends with the prince since before the founding of Bell's Pass. 6 Nosferatu, although only 3 that were known to the prince and the public, kept out of kindred affairs for the most part. 3 Toreador, who maintained Elysium and the social circles of the city, a sire and her 2 childer. A Tremere Chantry, with 1 gargoyle protecting it. No known Tremere in the city. 2 Ventru, unrelated to the prince, who served as his seneschal and sheriff respectively. They have much influence in the city's law enforcement and city hall. And 2 Kaitif, or Thin Bloods if you want, who have come out of hiding since the prince's disappearance. An unknown quantity of Thin Bloods. So, if you want to make a difference between Kaitif, who are clanless, and Thin Bloods, who are of such thin blood that they can't have clans, you can certainly make that. So, for this exercise, your task is to design the new power structure of the city. There are no right or wrong answers. Focus on Prince and Primogen. Should there be any? Why? Why not? Will the prince have any actual real power or be a figurehead? Who are excluded from the Primogen and why? What consequences do you see with your solution? And if there is time, maybe think about the roles of Seneschal, Keeper of Elysium, Sheriff, Herald, and Harpy. So, we'll end this video here because it's already almost an hour. But this exercise is really good because I'm pretty proud of this as well. It was fairly easy to write it up, if you want a spoiler, my patrons decided to make the gargoyle the prince of the city. To this day, I do not understand the reasoning behind it other than the memes. But yes, there is a chantry with one gargoyles, psychics protecting it. No known Tremere in the city. So there's only the gargoyle. Basically, a pretty interesting distribution of clans with plenty of room to expand on their personalities and reasons. This is just the basic kind of structure. And before I finish the video, if you ever decide to design a city, this is a really good way to start. This kind of very loose description of the city's history, its current circumstances, and the distribution of vampires. It's a good idea to kind of have this distribution in mind before you start fleshing things out, because oftentimes we tend to either under or overcompensate and either have a much too big population or not a big enough population at all. And this will give you at least a kind of a bare bones skeleton of how you want to do things. So next video, we're going to talk about, let's see here, the Anarchs, the Independents, the Sabbat, the Mortals, the other Night Folk, and oh god, that's a lot. Yeah, let's stir the pot. So it's going to be a continuation of this exercise, the creative session, the inner circle. I don't know why I called it that, but next episode will be out next week. I will record it tomorrow. Today is Wednesday. If I don't record it tomorrow, please post a comment saying, where's the episode, Primogen? You talked about an episode. Where's the episode, Primogen? That will certainly get me going. Thank you again, everyone, for your patience and for bearing with this somewhat odd presentation. And I hope to catch you all next week or earlier if you are a patron. So until then, be careful out there, for Gehenna may soon be upon us.